Welcome to the Identity Work Podcast. If you are a high achiever struggling to find purpose in work, then join us as we discover how to create more meaning in work and life. Welcome to 2026 and our first episode of the year on the Identity Work Podcast. We are excited. This is a monumental episode on multiple occasions because we have our first ever return guest, Emma Wood, the executive coach of the year, who's taking the Bay Area, Portland, Oregon, and Arvo Advisory by storm. Emma, we are excited to have you back with Adam and I.
Thank you. Best way to kick off the new year.
Good. And before we dive in, you just got back from a wedding in India. Actually, Adam got back from a wedding in Nashville. Less exciting, but cool. It's your brother. Shout out to your brother. But a wedding in India. Emma, just tell us about what an Indian wedding is like and what that experience was like before.
Yeah, it is a riot of sound and color and everybody participating and being a part of things. And it's total chaos. They tend to be very, very large. So I think this one was maybe 300 people and is considered quite small by Indian standards. But it's amazing. And you have one evening at the beginning where you often have different choreographed dances by different friend groups. So I did make a complete fool of myself as one of those friend group dances. And I love that everyone's just kind of a part of it. It's very inclusive. It's very joyous and boisterous. And then this one was an interesting mix because the bride was Swiss. And so they actually brought in some Western wedding traditions as well. So things like vows and toasts are not nearly as much a part of the Indian tradition, but this kind of blended various things. The groom is from India, the bride's from Switzerland. They live in New York now. But it was a ton of fun.
And was it really 3 or 4 days and were elephants there?
Yes. There were no elephants, but it was several days. And I did need an entire day to sleep afterwards. I think we started dinner at like 11:30 or midnight on at least one of the nights.
Wow. Amazing. Did you throw rice? That's the other thing I know about Indian weddings. There's a lot of rice throwing often.
Yes. As the bride and groom entered, I think folks did throw rice. I was part of the tunnel created with sparkler guns facing outwards. So I did not throw rice, but I think that's what the other people were throwing.
Love it. Adam, have you been to a wedding in India?
You are not going to expect the answer to this question, but yes, I have.
Wow.
I actually have. I crashed a wedding in India when I was in college. I was not invited, and we had 12 people show up, and we were told to be there 2 hours late. It was like we crashed the wedding, but we were told about it by a friend. So I don't know. But we were told to show up 2 hours late, and apparently that's cool in most traditions, but not the tradition for the one that we were crashing, and we didn't know that. And so we just walked into the ceremony mid intimate experience of them exchanging cloths, and everything stopped. And the entire wedding lined up to take photos of these dumb Americans that had showed up to this wedding. And I was wearing a full kurta, and the entire assembly was in white button downs. So it was just the Americans were in full Indian garb, and everyone else was in business casual.
What's wild is for a lot of Indian weddings, you probably would have been right on the money with that.
Yeah, we were looking fly.
You start quite late, and it's just more kind of flowy and so on.
Yeah, they seemed to be happy that we were there, I think, but it was definitely disruptive.
Well, Stephen,
I too have been to a wedding in India, just to be as cool as you.
What are the chances?
So
great.
All right, but today's topic is about we're going to dissect a New York Times article that Emma recommended to us, and the title says it all. I guess it points to the problem. It doesn't point to the solution. Hopefully we'll get to some of the solution today. But the title, it's a 2019 article by HBS, Harvard Business School graduate, and it's called America's Professional Elite, Wealthy, Successful, and Miserable. That could be the title of this episode. So, needless to say, it talks about the author's experience going back to his 15-year reunion and finding a lot of his colleagues who have achieved and yet they're miserable. And Emma, in your growing coaching practice, you've said this is articles kind of resonating. And one of the things that we talked about over lunch just before the new year was it kind of talked about how when you went back to the reunions, the people that were enjoying their jobs were the ones that had faced trials pretty early on, and that had really, I don't know, struck a chord with you, and I thought it was enlightening because it casts a light on something that we hadn't really talked about as much, even though we're 50 episodes into the podcast now. Um, so Emma, tell us a little bit about this article. Kind of, I know it's one you've shared and been reflecting on, and then kind of how you're seeing it as you coach a lot of CEOs and executives.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember exactly when I first found this article, but it's one of those ones that you just remember and keep going back to. Like one of the only articles I think I've done that with a number of times over the last 5, 6 years and shared it with a lot of both friends and clients. Because I think what stands out to me is just how things can compound over time if you're just comfortable enough and sort of just safe enough and not super happy, but you don't really know what you want to go do. And I see that a lot sort of across my various worlds. And certainly, I loved my time at McKinsey. I know McKinsey partners who absolutely love it. And I also know a lot of people at McKinsey or any similar firms who are kind of like almost accidental partners. They just never left because it kind of paid enough, it was comfortable enough, and they never figured out anything else. And so I think this article really highlights what that looks like actually 15 years down the line instead of just, oh, one more year, one more year. And then the flip side of actually, if you feel like doors are closing or you don't know your way or, you're not having the overnight success that people around you seem to be having, A, that there's a lot more to the story, and B, that there's a lot of room for you to figure it out. And it may actually serve you better than a really smooth path. And one trend I've seen going around just with the new year now is like friction maxing too, of actually what are the ways in which sort of ease and convenience don't necessarily serve us. And especially as we think about AI as well, replacing more and more, there's some ways that makes life better and some ways that actually it may not.
Hmm. Can you dive in there and tell us a little bit more what friction maxing is? I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. I don't know a ton about friction maxing specifically,
Yeah.
other than I think it's probably kind of what it sounds like. And it's people intentionally adding more friction back into their lives. So it could be as simple as a longer dog walk. Um, but the other thing that I'm actually just pulling up is after the wedding, we went up to Dharamshala, which is the seat of the Tibetan community in exile and where the Dalai Lama resides. And there was a quote from the Dalai Lama on a sort of hand painted billboard that really stuck with me called The Paradox of Our Age. And it was, "We have bigger houses, but smaller families, more conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees, but less sense, more knowledge, but less judgment, more experts, but more problems, more medicines, but less healthiness. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. We build more computers to hold more information to produce more copies than ever, but have less communication. We've become long on quantity, but short on quality. These are times of fast foods, but slow digestion, tall men, but short character, steep profits, but shallow relationships. It's a time when there's much in the window, but nothing in the room."
Damn, it's good.
Are we done? We're done there, I think, right? I think that's the end.
That's the episode. Just play
so
that
good.
over like 3 times.
Yeah,
so
we'll just loop it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I, hadn't made that connection until this moment and quickly pulled up the photo, but that ties in perfectly with this article.
Yeah, Emma, you made a really interesting comment as you were introducing this article that is really like sitting with me. The way you talked about like compounding ease. You started this sentence talking about compounding, and every time I hear the word compounding, I'm like, oh, compounding is great. This is going to be good. Something good's happening from compounding. But almost this like inverse of like compounding little goods that end up being very macro bad because they're sort of trending you in a direction that is very hard to escape from. Um, I always envisioned, like, the first day I showed up at Bain, this
Uh-huh.
consultant said, "Watch out for the golden handcuffs."
Yes.
And I always envisioned the golden handcuffs, like, showed up in a very sparkly box, and it was obvious whether right now I'm gonna accept them or I'm going to decline the
Huh?
golden handcuffs. And I think it's a lot slower than that. It's a lot more, like, insidious in the way that they materialize. And so I don't know, I just that sort of idea really stuck with me in what you were talking about. I'd be curious for you to, sort of, like, go deeper into that
Yeah,
idea.
and I think that's exactly it. It's not a overnight thing. It's something that will slowly grow one way or the other. So, I mean, one of the stories in the article was about the man who was making $1.2 million dollars a year investing, but hated his job and had gotten an offer from a startup for like his dream job, but it didn't pay nearly as much. And his wife laughed at him for even like considering it because their lifestyle needed that 1.2 million now to support it. And so, yes, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to make huge trade offs. And people do that sometimes, but it's really hard. And so that's where, had you stayed at Bain, say, and your lifestyle just kept creeping up and other things, like, do you suddenly one day realize you have the handcuffs on? So it's less choosing to accept them and put them on versus like, oh, I'm actually quite locked in here and feel stuck. And again, you're not actually stuck unless you let yourself be, but it's a lot harder and it can be a lot more confusing or feel overwhelming and intimidating and have some real trade offs and costs.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's more than of the handcuffs than just, like, lifestyle too. Like, I think
Uh-huh.
for me, when I envisioned the golden handcuffs, like, there was never a real risk that I was gonna live at $1 million a year of spending, like, that was just never gonna happen for me, but I do think there was a real risk that I ended up 15 years down the road at Bain, sort of, like, with only the skill sets possible to be a consultant and really wanting to, like, restart in product or something and going to try to convince someone to do that I could do product and then being like, "Who the heck are you? Like, we're not gonna pay you $500,000 a year to be an analyst," you know? And almost just like the skill set you build can also compound ease towards ease in a way that's like takes away your options in a way you don't want.
Yeah. I think it's the skill set. I think it's the identity piece of it, not only in terms of status and prestige, but also in terms of mastery or in terms of you don't have hobbies or you don't have as many relationships because you've made all these sacrifices. I was coaching a woman who's a GP at a venture capital firm today and, thinking about she could retire, but doesn't quite know what she would do with her time. And so some of going on to raise this next fund for her is actually wanting to do it and prove something. But some of it is also coming from, this and raising my kids is all I've done for the last couple decades. So I think there are a lot of ways that you can get locked into that. And suddenly you wake up and look around and realize, how did I get here?
Yeah, and maybe too for some of our listeners who might be there. I mean, we talk about a lot of our listeners are a little bit in the early midlife crisis of kind of waking up and realizing that maybe the golden handcuffs are there. Like, what is someone to do in that situation who's maybe beginning to realize, like, I'm here. Is this really where I want to be?
Mhm.
Any thoughts on that?
What's coming up for me is you don't necessarily have to just burn it all down. And ignoring it is unlikely to make it better. So, can you start looking at it and just sort of without judgment or shaming yourself, just start getting curious and experimenting with things? And I think similar to, obviously it's early January right now, a lot of people are setting resolutions. If I set a resolution, if I'm, not used to working out at all, and I set a resolution that I'm going to go to the gym every single day for an hour, probably by February, I will have dropped off. A much more approachable, sustainable way to do that might be I'm going to do 10 push ups every single day. And actually, at the end of a month, I will be significantly stronger. At the end of 2 or 3 months, like again, coming back to compounding, Adam, those little bits add up. So if I do 10 push ups a day for 30 days, I'm going to be more fit than if I go to the gym 3 times for an hour in the first week of January and then don't go or go 1 or 2 other times. And so I'd say similar here of if you wake up and find that, just starting to tap into what brings me joy, what gives me energy, and they can be little things. I know some people have had great success keeping a celebration journal where you write down one thing a day, just one thing, and it can be as big or as small as you want. But over time, starting to notice and appreciate that and also notice some of the patterns. So I have one former colleague who actually switched careers because she noticed she kept writing down this one thing and she kept being pulled to that and, getting energy from that and finally took the leap and has been hugely successful doing that now. So, but like those are little things to start with. Just what gives you energy, what do you enjoy doing rather than what you think you should be doing? Because even that should is like, oh man, I should be saving the world instead of working in corporate America. And that's still a grandiose should.
Yeah. That was one of the headlines from our last conversation that we had you on too, was just the
Mhm.
dangers of should. But I
Yeah.
think those are really good, very simple tactical steps
Mhm.
that our listeners can take. It's good. Adam, looks like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I forget what book this is in. I suspect y'all have read it,
It's
but
one of the 53 and a half that you've read.
yeah, my numbers have been really slowing down. Steven used to really ramp it up quick, but we've been hovering at this 50 number for a long time. Uh, uh, the Wow, now you distracted me from my point and it's gone. Oh, no. Okay, here we go. In habit formation,
Mhm.
the point is that it's often like you often have to stop yourself before you feel like you need to, particularly like early in a
Mhm.
habit,
Yeah.
um, to the point where you don't like exhaust yourself and like lose energy. And again, I forget what book it was, but the basic idea was like set some goal that's way below what you think is actually like reasonable to you, where it's still going to be not just like tolerable but joyful when
Mhm.
you finish feeling like I should do 5 more minutes of this and like
Yeah.
force yourself to stop.
Yeah.
Um, so that you actually build like recurring habits of doing that and not burning yourself out is a much more effective way than trying to like max it out to
Yes.
your fullest extent the first time you go try to do something new.
Which again, like I'm getting deep into marathon training again for a spring marathon. And it's like you don't actually want to give your like full 100% until race day. Because if I gave absolutely, 100% every single training run for the next several months, then I'm likely to burn out and get hurt and not even make it for race day.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I'd like to
That
welcome
has not been
Rollo
my
to the
my
show.
yeah, welcome puppy. Yeah, I'm really bad at this habit. I think it's so hard to do to feel like you're capable of something. And I feel like I've personally even built my identity around like I'm a driver. Like I'm a
Hmm.
pusher, right? Like I can do hard things. That's like who I am. And so it feels like everything I do should be getting to the state of hard, or I was a useless like exertion of effort. Like why did I use any time if I didn't end up, ripping my muscles so that they get to regrow.
Hmm.
But then I don't go back to the gym because it was hard, and it was useless.
And with that, I think like we so often glorify hard work and then downplay things that aren't just hard. And I think hard work is important. Hard work can be great in some ways, but just saying, hard work equals success or hard work equals value can also be a tricky trap that people get stuck in. And that doesn't scale at a certain point, and also can lead to like, am I making things harder on myself because I just believe that I need to do hard things?
My this is maybe like too intimate of a detail, but an early fight that my wife and I had
Uh-huh.
in our marriage was I like a couple weeks into being married, I was like, I really am afraid that our life is going to be too easy and we should make it harder. Like, what are
Mhm.
the ways that we can make our life intentionally hard? And she was like, you are out of your freaking mind. Um,
Okay.
but I really did have that mindset. She has been really good at like sort of like gradually reshaping that
Mhm.
part of my heart, which has been a really beautiful transformation. But it was like, if it's not hard, then it's useless. was
Yeah.
my entire life mentality. Looking back now, it's kind of crazy, but
So so what's the impact then over time as some of those beliefs and assumptions have reshaped?
I think I feel a lot more joyful in small moments for sure, and a lot more um, like accepting of my state of energy in the day. Um, a very tiny example is I've I've seen TV as this sort of like evil villain in my life for a really long time. And like every minute of watching TV is full and like indulgent and terrible. And like I do it, but I don't like that I do it.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the last couple of months, I've been like, actually, it's kind of fun to watch an episode of TV each day. And it's instead of like critiquing every time that I do this, like I do it every night and then I'm mad at myself for doing it. Why don't I just say, like, I kind of like watching a 30-minute show every night with my wife and like drinking tea. It's a really
Mhm.
nice thing. And so I'm going to stop being mad at myself for doing that and embrace that that is like a fun thing that I do. And it's made it way better. So that's I don't know, an example of how it's changed over time.
Mhm.
Fun one. uh, I'm gonna pivot a little bit, if you can
Yeah.
excuse
I think
me.
we've sort of gotten away from the
Yeah,
article.
for sure, for sure.
The article does unpack a what I'll call a common formula framework around meaningful work and pulls out some research from Adam Grant talking about autonomy and expertise, enjoying the people you work with, and then connecting to like a broader purpose, which is are very aligned with like all the themes. We've probably all read the same research, so I think it's a helpful reminder that those are like kind of four key ingredients, if you will. As I read the article and it talked about like connecting to purpose, and it talked about our $1.2 million friend who's like, yeah, I'm investing and then I'm helping someone a pensioner's pension to grow. And he's like, it just doesn't, the purpose just isn't there for me.
Mhm.
And I think we struggle with that on like, how do you really tie into an authentic purpose that's just not like purpose washing, if you will, of like kind of that example of like, yeah, I'm helping retirees by investing. Which I think there is some authenticity to that. But I was gonna go back to my team and it's like, how do you find what we're doing for our clients, like connecting to like a broader
Sure.
purpose and like have that be a lunchtime conversation for us. Any thoughts there? I guess for either of you of like how you tie your work to a broader purpose that's not just like cute.
I have some thoughts, but I'm also curious to hear
Yeah.
your answers first.
Yeah, I feel like I've thought about this a lot, and I've gotten to the point of abandoning any attempt to have like second order meaning out of my work. I've just found that that has never resonated with me. Um, like at Bain, trying to convince myself that like improving the profitability of an organization to like increase jobs, or my last company worked with small businesses, and it was like
Mhm.
we're building the backbone software for the backbone of America so that like more hourly workers can get paid on time. And I think that like sounds nice to say, but when I show up on Monday, it just always has felt very far away from me. Um and so I think I've just gotten to this point of like I'm just not going to say that, and I care a lot more about like I want to do good work because the person that helps the person that is next to me like have a
Mhm.
better Monday. And that has been a lot more where
Mm.
I have sort of grounded my like impact or sense of meaning, has just been like this team, how do I make their lives easier today? How do I like do work that collectively helps us win regardless of what problem we're solving? And that has felt more true and authentic, and like I've connected with that approach a lot more over the last year.
Mhm.
That's good. Yeah, the second order one is exactly what I was getting to, and you like put words to it. Um, yeah. All right,
I think
Emma.
also just what does it look like in your day to day? So is that second order, does it feel far away or very theoretical, or is it close in? So one of the studies that this article talks about, I've heard lots of different folks talk about it, is of hospital janitors. And those who just kind of view their job more transactionally of I'm changing bedpans and things, it was very different in terms of satisfaction and I believe outcomes as well versus those who believed I'm really caring for people. But I think the key there is that latter group, they were actually interacting with people day to day and seeing that it wasn't just this theoretical, they weren't the people at the manufacturing plant making the bedpans, say. And so I think for myself as well, it's almost more, am I living purposefully than just have I found my purpose? Dave Evans and Bill Burnett from the Stanford D School have talked about this a lot. And that one of the biggest kind of misconceptions we often have is like, you need to go find your purpose. And until you find your purpose or your passion, like you're never going to be happy. You're not going to be successful. Like, I can't help you. Come back to me when you have. And for most people, that's incredibly hard to find. Most don't find it, or if they do, it's much later in life. Versus actually, what does it look like to live purposefully? So, what are some of your core values, and what does it look like to live in integrity with those day to day? What are the, things, people, places that give you energy or give you joy? What does it look like to incorporate more of those into your life? I think some of those things can give a lot of purpose. Adam, you mentioned like, oh, do I help the guy sitting next to me? Like that gives me some purpose. Great, that's a relationship.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for knowledge workers to have this connection. I think like physical work sort of naturally connects you to whatever you're doing there, like the problem that's being solved. But like building software, what I do is like so removed from the actual person that's using this and getting any kind of value from it. And like banking or consulting, like all these things are, you got to take a lot of leaps to get to the actual problem that's being solved. And I think the further you are from it, the harder it is to really feel connected to it.
Yeah, and I'm like what you said too about, I think that's another common theme from our conversations is in a paradigm shift for me of like, I need to find the dream job. I need to find my purpose. But I don't really know what it is. Versus, like how can you create meaning? And then I like, how can you live in your purpose? And like, what does that mean? But like aligned with your values and like working with like relationally rich. I think is really important. And I think what you said too about like even just viewing jobs as not transactional but relational, I think can help go to purpose a lot more. Like they're not just in it for the deliverable, but they're in it like, yeah, as you said, Adam, helping the person next to you, helping our clients. Just like, yeah, getting away from the transaction and more towards the relationship.
Yeah. There's a reason that solitary confinement is a form of torture.
Yeah. The harshest form of torture too.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
are deeply, deeply relational beings.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Um, what what else stuck out to you guys from the article, or is there anything we didn't get to, that we should get to?
I had an interesting, I don't know, takeaway or an interesting thought as I read the article that I'd be curious to get your thoughts, opinions, reflections on. It talked about the people that ended up being the happiest, maybe not the most successful, having the most meaningful work were the people that had failed, had missed opportunities, had sort of been forced into struggle in a way that led them um, to find themselves and what they connected to more like better. Um, Reflecting on my own journey, I don't think I fit that mold of like I got passed over for stuff that I wanted, but I do think I took a lot of risks. Like in my 10 years of my career, first 10 years I did 5 different totally different jobs in like kind of different industries. And the job I'm doing now is an almost identical job to the last job that I did, but I feel a lot more meaning in the job this time. And I think for me, a big part of that is just like I have a lot of reps, seeing a lot of different things and realizing
Recognition.
like all of these good things. I think I eventually learned like, oh, there isn't this magic job out there. Like I need to learn to like enjoy what I'm doing because I've tried a bunch of things and they're all kind of have bad stuff in them. And so I need to stop thinking there's something magic out there. And so I connected to sort of that part of it. And then looking at the people who she used as, examples of what not to do, the $1.2 million friend, like all of those people, it seemed like sort of followed one path the whole time. Like they kind of were an investment banker and they did that for 20 years. They kept making more and more money and they never really got to try something different. And so it was a long lead in to say, like, how important is experimentation? How important is risk? How important is just a sheer like quantity of shots on goal of trying different things in terms of finding meaning?
I mean, I imagine one of the reasons why it's so beneficial that you've done so many different things, Adam, is it's given you more perspective and just perspective on like nothing is perfect. And so if every job is going to have its downsides or, its problems, can you at least choose the problems you'd rather be saddled with? So something I get a lot as a coach is people kind of look at what I'm doing. They're like, wow, you work for yourself. You have all this flexibility. Like that must be the dream job. And it's like, yes, there are all these amazing things. There are also hard parts. Even you can probably resonate with this too. And we've talked about some of these of like starting your own business from scratch also brings stress, or it's like PTO is not a thing. I can take time off, but nobody's just giving me a paycheck while I'm gone. And so
It's
for
just
me,
TO.
yeah, exactly, just TO. Um, or, I have a bunch of friends these days going out on like 6-month paid maternity leaves. And I'm like, wow, that sounds really nice. Um, but overall, I would still chose those trade-offs because there are so many things that I love about what I do. And I do love the autonomy. I do love the flexibility. I think it's just recognizing that like for some people, those trade-offs would actually not be worth it in the least. And so I think the more that people try different things, you start to get a sense of like, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. It's kind of like dating. Most of us don't marry the first person that we date, too. But going through and dating different people helps you figure out and learn to be in a good relationship. I see a lot of people too who are scared they're going to miss the boat if they don't just find that one thing really early. And so in their 20s or early 30s, it's like, I haven't found that thing yet. I'm a failure. I'm going to be a failure. And so I love that this article highlights that actually, for a lot of the folks who struggled or didn't have things work early on, they built more resilience, they built more clarity. Found stuff that actually was authentic to them. And then they were equally, if not more successful.
I really do not appreciate how long a career is. There's a lot of years that you can do
Yes.
stuff and try things. And I think, my third year being like, I haven't figured it out yet. I got to figure it out. Is like
Yes.
pretty rushed.
Yep. I made some comment to my dad as I was coming out of business school of like, now that I'm entering like the mid stage of my career. And he was like, I'm sorry. You are not yet in that. But I think especially for folks who've been in these really competitive schools and workplaces, all of the schools that we've been to, all consulting firms we've worked at, et cetera, it can feel like, because you're on this rocket ship that you have to arrive right away. Versus like, I'm 2 years into a consulting job out of college. No, I've got another, however many decades to keep learning and growing.
Yeah. What you just said there, Emma, reminded me of a quote. I was reading a murder mystery last night, but there was a really good
Cool.
lesson on meaningful work. It's called Magpie Murders, I believe. We can add it to the show notes. But the quote was there was a success. It's talking about a successful author, which is ironic in a book. But it says, when you've been pursuing ambition all your life, it's actually quite frightening to achieve it.
Yes.
Because where will you go next?
Yep.
What if you achieve it when you're 24? I feel like that's a lot of the problem that like people around me I've experienced is like my first job out of college is like the job that a lot of people fight their lives to get into HBS to then go get. And like I was kind of here at 22. Like, where do I go from there? The
Even
hard questions.
a lot of child prodigies don't go on to be super successful artists. A lot of child stars, their lives kind of crash and burn and they struggle with a ton of stuff. Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, has given some really interesting talks and I think wrote an entire book kind of about where do you go from there after the success of a book like Eat, Pray, Love, whether or not you like it, like massively successful. And she's like, nothing I ever write again will probably sell as many copies. Um, so as a creative, what do you do with that? And that's where I think too, if it's a certain end destination you're shooting for, that's really hard because you might never get there. And even if you do, then what are you going to do? Versus can you enjoy the journey or can you live purposefully along the way?
Yeah, that's good. I also heard actually a sports broadcaster who works with a lot of athletes, right? Because a lot of athletes, a lot of Olympians reach peak fame at 25 and
Yeah.
where do you go from there? And he talked about how can you view that as an assignment and not like your identity or like who you are kind of deal of like how can you view these different things as assignments? And that stuck with me when he had said that. I think somebody else kind of on our podcast had mentioned that too, but thinking of
Huh.
these things as a a point in the road or like an assignment versus like that's versus your identity of like who you are kind of deal.
And the paradox there is you actually might be even more successful what you're doing because when your whole identity is wrapped up in having to succeed and sort of it feels like survival, that's a huge amount of pressure versus it being more of a preference of like, I'd really like to be wildly successful, whether it's in sports or business or something else, but it's not my whole identity. It can actually like be much easier then to be adaptable and flexible and see different opportunities than when you're just laser focused.
I lived in Denver for a couple of years, and in Denver, everyone is obsessed with the Nuggets. And there's a very famous meme of the best basketball player on the Nuggets, Nikola Jokic, and
Yeah.
who I don't know if you've seen this meme, but
Mm-mm.
it simultaneously pairs up him winning the NBA championship and his like horse in Slovenia winning an amateur race. And his reaction to both of those things is like he wins the
What?
NBA championship and he's just kind of like, thank you, I can now go home. And then his horse in Slovenia wins and he's like weeping, hugging the horse. Like
Huh?
he just is like overjoyed at this horse winning this race. Um, and he is like the poster child of like basketball as a job for him and he's good at it and it is very much not his identity and
Hmm.
that frees him to be very loose and sort of like comfortable in taking risks on the basketball court.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he would probably point to that
Going to
as a
Slovenia.
marker of his success. Yeah. And getting back to Slovenia, he's got some really funny quotes. If you ever want to look up his like NBA
Okay.
championship quotes, they'll interview him like before game 3 of the finals, and he'll be like, "I'm ready to go home. I am tired of playing basketball." You're like, dude, this is like the championship, you know, like you should
Yeah.
kind of be interested in this. And he's like, like I need to go see my horses. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay.
So good. Okay. Well, we're just like that. We're pretty close to time. Anything else before we move into our always on questions?
I feel like Slovenian horses is a great way to end.
Great. Well said. Okay, we'll now go to our trend spotter. Emma, this is a new section that we've had. You've probably been listening to our podcast, but we talk about any interesting trends coming across our desk. But we're going to give you the trend, or maybe it's not a trend, it's more of a life hack. Before, as we were getting ready for this episode, you talked to us about this thing that will enable you to have one glass of wine at a time from a bottle, but the wine never goes bad. What an unlock. Um, I'm probably
Yep.
not
I've got my
describing it
glass
very
of
good.
wine right here and the rest of the bottle. I don't know when I'll drink.
So what is the tool that you have that enables you to drink one glass of wine at a time, but the bottle not to go bad?
It is called a Coraven. And it's this contraption that essentially sticks a needle through the cork. And then you press a little button and it pulls out some of the liquid and then fills the bottle with, I think it's argon gas. And then the cork just naturally will reseal. Some restaurants use it. You may have seen it particularly for high-end pours. Those like $60 a glass that they're not going to just open a whole bottle. So they'll use a Coraven. And I love it.
My gosh, this whole time I've had no idea. I've always been like, wow, that's crazy. They got to have like 4 people order this same wine or they just throw it out.
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of bottles, yes, but often for those like super premium pours, it's because they're using a Coravin. Because otherwise, it's just too high waste and high risk for them. But as a home drinker, particularly as somebody who lives on her own, I like it because if I want to have a glass of wine, like I did while recording this tonight, and I don't want to open a whole bottle, I can have a glass, and then the bottle could keep for months or years longer. Unlike just a vacuum pump where it might preserve it for a few more days, but it's not going to preserve it longer term.
Wow.
Highly recommend.
It's too bad Christmas just ended.
I know. Really good Black Friday sale.
The company is.
How do you get Oregon gas?
So,
do you have to buy a tank of Oregon gas and bring it?
No, they're little capsules.
Okay.
They look like little silver bullet kind of things.
Okay.
They might
Oregon
have a
gas
January
seems
sale.
like something
so many people doing dry January. Maybe nobody's buying Coravins.
What is like the range of budget options for a Coravin? Is this like starting price $500? I was going to give one to
a listener for free, and then I'm like,
maybe not.
Yeah. I've had mine for years, so I don't remember exactly. I think they start at like maybe a couple hundred or 150, and
200.
then 200. Okay, and then they go up. They've got some fancier models. They even have a sparkling wine one that I still don't totally get how that works. But I think I just have
comes with CO2
one. Okay, there we go. I just have one of the more entry level ones. I've had it for years. You have to buy the gas capsule replacements, but it's great.
So cool.
Any other trend? And Emma, we'll just keep you on the hot seat since you're here tonight. As you coach leaders going into the new year, you and I had conversation about 2026 planning and just what are some things that are coming up with the leaders that you're coaching right now as leaders think about 2026.
A lot of folks are tired, and even I think like I talked to a couple people in the last day or two who maybe did something fun over the holidays, but are like, I kind of need a vacation from my vacation now. And so I think even just recognizing that the holidays can be tiring and stressful, even if they're maybe also enjoyable and fun. Often we feel this pressure to have to come into the new year and like, I set goals, I set resolutions, I hit the ground running. And so are there some ways to be gentler on yourself? So whether that's, I do like doing some intention setting. I don't do your kind of traditional resolutions. But some years I do that in mid-January or late January, or I'm leading a retreat in Costa Rica next month. And like, that's a great time to come get really present and think about how you want to be for the rest of the year. So it doesn't need to be done the first week of January. And even if you think about nature, like winter is a time of more hibernation and rest. It's not a time of crazy all out growth the way that your garden might have in summer. And yet we expect ourselves to sort of act like this crazy blooming bush in the dead of winter. And so even before I do any of that intention setting too, I like to really go back and reflect on the last year and reflect on what are the things I'm ready to release? What are the things that are kind of no longer living and need pruning? All of that before you just get into like grow, grow, grow. And so I think especially given so much uncertainty and chaos in the world right now, people are feeling that. And so not being overly harsh on yourself of like, man, I've got to be, right out the gate.
Damn. We should probably end there. Again, are we going to get an explicit tag for this podcast? Who knows? That was good, Adam, unless you're chomping.
I don't know if I can put you guys back in the hot seat, but I'm curious what you're either seeing or feeling as we enter the new year. To turn the question back on you.
Adam normally has a hot take on the latest AI release, but
yeah, I don't know if I have any real AI releases. A quick like brag on myself, something I'm kind of proud of that I learned today is I'm in the like top 10 engineer like releases and like pull requests merged in our code base. have been in like the top 10 in the last like 2 or 3 months. And we have like over like some engineers that they would empower me to be able to do that. And so I don't know, as I enter the new year, I'm thinking a lot about like sort of what boundaries exist in terms of like what we can do that was once hard that is becoming very easy, but maybe my mental framing of that is still like that should be hard to do, and so I don't try. I'm sort of like thinking about how to where to like recognize those things, break down those boundaries and barriers. I don't know if I had a trend that's like top of my mind.
Yeah, and I'll go less trend and more kind of on the mind on intentions for 2026. I put in kind of my year-end company update for Arvo, just like thinking more about how can we be fearless this year.
Mhm.
Spurred a lot kind of from some of our conversations, Emma, and even from this podcast too. Just like, what would it be like? Just like to not be afraid if a client cancels, or to not be afraid going into biz dev, or to not be afraid to sell a project wildly bigger than I. And so I think fear has too much of a hold on our lives and so I think and then when I just thought about that, it's just like sounds fun, sounds brave and
Mhm.
courageous. And then I'm a similar of like we don't really set goals. Lexi and I try to choose a word of the year. So our word this year is called presence, both to like live in the present moment and then also try to experience God's presence a little bit more. So reflecting like how can we press into that? Um and so yeah, those are some things top of mind, or I guess two words, thinking about going into 2026. But I get kind of what you're saying, Emma. Everyone's tired, or we're seeing it clients just busy and just slammed. And that's where I'm like, how can we make our clients' life just like a little bit easier? And like strategic pillars, how can we like be hospitable to them and treat them relationally, not transactionally? Because everyone's just like burnt out. So
Mhm. And
yeah,
where does pushing harder counterproductive and a little bit of softening or compassion is not only feels better, but again, might be more effective.
yeah,
Can I
yep,
share one last thing that came to mind too as you were sharing, Stephen?
yep.
There's another coach and author I like called Victoria Song, and she talks about like the three fields of reality. So we've got predictability, possibility, and potentiality. So predictability is like, I know exactly how to do it. I know how to get the results, but results in that field is all comes from working harder. Possibility is the next step up of like, it could go either way. It's possible I'm going to be successful. You often don't know the how, or almost definitionally won't know the how, but there, the key ingredient is courage. So you have hard work is the first one, courage for possibility. And then that last one is sort of the crazy dream, the seed that you're planting. You have no idea how it would come to fruition. And there, the key ingredient is trust. And so I like that of thinking about like, okay, from just working harder to like, really, how do I be courageous? Which I think is where you and your team keep stepping
Hmm.
up, Stephen. And then also, how do I trust and sort of put it out to whether it's the universe or God or whatever it is that you believe in? Luck.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good word.
Faith is
Yeah,
my words for the year. I'm not personally religious, but faith in terms of just the broader meaning of that.
wow, cool. Thanks for sharing that. And that is a cool linear path. I
Mhm.
hadn't thought about that that segment before.
Yeah. And you can operate at all three levels. It's not that you have to go one from one to the next, but recognizing kind of what's the mix of different things because you're not going to get those outsized results from just the predictable working harder.
As you said earlier, it's not scalable.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Well, Emma, learned a ton from you as always. You are a gifted communicator, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a joy to have you.
You were so welcome. It was my pleasure.
Adam, get back to work. You still got 2 hours on the. After
Speaking
last
of working
episode,
harder.
I did have a super fan text me saying, "Steven, I am worried about Adam. He's working a lot." I thought that was
Oh.
sweet. Um, so yeah, hang in there.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time. This show has been brought to you by Arvo Advisory, a new category of consulting company, half management consultancy and half executive communication and PR firm. Arvo works with great leaders to craft and communicate their strategy to achieve change and create valuable companies. Find out more at arvoadvisory.com or follow us on LinkedIn. And finally, if you've been blessed at all by this podcast, please remember to rate and review the show or share it with a friend. And with that, go forth and know that you are loved because of who you are and not because of what you do for work. See you next time.